Happy Webinar Wednesday to you on this spooky edition of Lulu Webinars. So I can see that some of you have already dropped into the chat. Hello and where you're from. So thank you so much for doing that. You can already see our special guest, Andy, is here. And we will be tuning into him in just a minute. I'll have him answer some questions about the work that he's doing in the horror genre. But to get started, so if this is your first Webinar Wednesday with Lulu, a few housekeeping things are that this session is recorded. Everyone who registered will get a link to the recording. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I appreciate y'all telling us where you're from. But if you have any questions specific to Andy and what he's going to talk about today, drop them in and we will try to get to them. So I think that those are basically the only things. If you come late or leave early, again, the recording will be sent to you. It'll also be on our YouTube channel. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and kick this thing off. All right. So Andy, can you let me know? Can you see my screen?
Yep, with the cat in the hat.
Yep. That's right. That is right. Yes, it is a cat in the hat. So any of you who have tuned into these webinars before may recognize this slide a little bit. I did try to spook it up a bit. I guess I had a little bit too much fun with the with the witch hats, as you will see. So we are Lulu. I am Lulu. I am a part of Lulu. If you don't know who we are, Lulu is a real word. So it means remarkable person, object, or idea. So we're all Lulus here today, I like to say. So we were founded in 2002. Our 20-year birthday is actually coming up in February of next year. So excited about that. Our platform is free to use. We published over 1 million books and paid out over $107 million in author revenue. So you can see our mission statement here is that we are dedicated to making the world a better place, one book at a time through sustainable practices, innovative print-on-demand products, and a commitment to excellent service. So a little bit more about that, that commitment to transparency and accountability leads us to our B Corp certification. So if you're not familiar with B Corps, I always like to share this. I think it's really exciting. However, if you're not familiar with the B Corp movement, it's just for-profit companies that are certified by a third party to meet rigorous standards of social and environmental performance, accountability, and transparency. So very exciting. I'm always really proud to be a part of this movement, especially as the holidays are coming up. If you're looking for a way to spend your dollars in maybe a more aware, sustainable way, check out the community of B Corps. All right, so this is me. I am Chelsea. I am Lulu's brand engagement manager. I will sort of be the guide through today's webinar, but Andy is going to take the lead in a minute. And that's my cat, Batman. And you might not be able to tell this from looking at this picture, but we are not actually wearing those hats. I just got really good at Keynote ahead of this presentation. All right, a little bit more about Lulu before we start the show. Again, if you're not familiar, we do self-publishing via print on demand. It is free to publish on Lulu. You just bring us your interior file and your cover file, go through our publishing prompts, and then your work is free to sell to the world and your readers. Since we're print on demand, there are no minimums or maximums, so you can try it out. It's very low risk, high reward. So after today's talk, if you're just feeling incredibly inspired by Andy and the words he's going to share with us today, then you can publish your own work too. And then we publish in print and ebook format. Then we have over 3,000 formats to choose from. So one for everybody, we hope. All right, so the main event. We're here today with Andy, who's going to talk to us about Wyrd Harvest Press. I put a little bit of information on this slide and some of the awesome books that they have available. But Wyrd Harvest Press books explore the landscape of folk horror and related realms in film, TV, books, art, music, events, and other media, and also psychogeography, hauntology, folklore, cultural rituals and costumes, earth mysteries, archaic history, hauntings, Southern Gothic, landscapism / visionary naturalism and geography, backwoods horror, murder ballads, carnavalia, dark psychedelia, weird fortania, and other strange edges. So I think this today we can cover any corner of the weird and the wonderful that you would like to touch on. I think Wyrd Harvest has it covered here. And then the man of the hour, Andy, wearing double hats in this picture. So Andy Paciorek is an illustrator and author specializing in the weird, anomalous, folkloric, uncanny, haunting, and horror fields. He is the creator of Folk Horror Revival, Wyrd Harvest Press, Drummer Press, Urban Weird Project, and the Northumbria Ghost Lore Society. His work has been published by numerous outlets, including HarperCollins, 14 Times, Rue Morgue, and various others. I think that says various others. I have something on the screen, but that's a lot. So we're so excited to have you, Andy. And if you're ready to go, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I'm ready. I seem to have disappeared. I don't know if you can see me there.
I can see your picture, and if you want to turn your camera on, I think, yeah, there you go. Hey, man. All right. Yeah,
no,
so thank you so much for joining us. I can see you, and everything is good. So awesome. Thanks so much. All right, so we'll get you started. I sent Andy some questions ahead of time. Again, if you have others, drop them in the chat. But for me, I'm just interested in how did you get into all this spooky horror stuff?
Okay. All right. Thanks, and thanks for inviting us here. And hello, everyone. I can't see you, but I presume you're there. If I disappear, I just had a pop-up there saying the connection had dropped. So if it goes again and you can't see, I haven't been abducted by aliens. Well, I might have been abducted by aliens, but the chances are it's just the connection's dropped.
Probably does.
So if I disappear, you know what's going on. Well, that's the story anyway. How did I get into horror? It's so long ago, it's really hard to remember. It has been since I was an infant. Just a weird kid, really. Books. Books was a good way that I actually got into it, so it's rather fitting. This, I have lost my original copy. This is a replacement one because I put my original one in a safe place. I haven't found where the safe place is yet, but at some point in the future it might turn up. But this book has a lot to answer for. Mysteries of the Unknown, Monsters, Ghosts and UFOs. And that just filled my mind at a very young age with all kinds of strange stuff. Beautiful illustrated book. Certain things in it like the monsters, all different monsters, which got us drawn as well. I would draw things which I saw in the book. So this was an early item that was to blame. And also I haven't got them to hand, but books by a writer called Alan Frank, who wrote about horror films. And when I was a kid, at my age, I was part of what the writer and broadcaster Bob Fisher calls the haunted generation. So growing up in England in the 70s and 80s, particularly the 70s, there was a lot of horror TV, a lot of horror themed all sorts, really. Bags of crisps, which we would call potato chips, with horror themes, bones and fangs. Count Dracula ice lollies, which were black ice with a gooey red center. Things like that. All things like that were like catered for children, but with a real supernatural horror bent. And come weekends, 2 channels, one on a Saturday night and one on a Friday night, would host double bills of horror films. And so I would watch them, but as a community thing, which later reflects in work that I do now, is with school friends, we would do stopovers at each other's houses, different weeks, different houses, to watch these films. And in the summer holidays, we would make our own horror comics. So we would write our own stories and draw our own pictures for it and stuff. And those school friends have gone on to do proper jobs and things, but I'm still stuck in that time warp of doing that, basically. So that's really how I got into horror. I've got some other questions here, so I'll just run through what I've been given so far. If we've got time at the end and anybody else wants to ask anything, then, you know, I'm open to that as well. So a few of these questions I'll link together. But the first 2, what is folk horror revival and what kind of work do we publish? It would take a whole talk in itself to, and it has done several, to actually explain specifically what folk horror is. In the introduction, Chelsea there gave the little rundown about the sort of topics that our books cover, and that basically covers a lot of the ground that folk horror does. There is more nuance to it, but putting a quick, basic sense, it's a it's a mode of horror, almost a subgenre, but it applies a little bit further than that. So it's often concerned with rural things. With the word folk, it goes back to folk beliefs, folk customs, folklore. So you will find things in that such as fertility rites, witchcraft. It's those kinds of areas that it mostly deals itself with, pagan gods, things like that. But as it's progressed over the years and with a revival of it, writers, filmmakers are looking at different ways of applying it. But unusual amongst areas of horror is that one, it doesn't just relate to horror, and two, it isn't just confined to the written word and film. You will get folk horror music. There's academic study of folk horror, as there is with wider horror, but particularly with folk horror because of the different areas it goes into. And not all of the things are horror based. A lot of things like new nature writing, the style of that poetry, which is quite unusual across the board for most horror. I mean, you do get horror poetry, but it is something that works well with folk horror. So children's literature that isn't specifically vampires and stuff like that. You could have like an old book like Masquerade, which was basically it was a clever book. There was the story behind it is there was a piece of jewelry hidden in Britain, and you would use this book as a treasure guide to it. But whereas that was too complicated for children to actually, most children to really work out where this treasure would be. Within the book, within the illustrations, there would be hairs hidden in the pictures because the piece of jewelry was hair-shaped, so you would have to find them. And that's not horror at all, but it would associate to the kind of aesthetic and mindset of folk horror. With folk horror revival, as the name suggests, it isn't just a revisitation of old folk horror, which had its main first heyday at the end of the 60s, early 70s. With the revival, it was always the idea behind the project was that new works would be created. So it started off basically as a Facebook group where people could gather, and that's where we found a lot of the people to contribute to our books. So we were just thinking different ways how we could produce new works and new formats of presenting folk horror to a wider audience today. So live events is one road we went down. To have social groups where people could talk and discuss things and work together on new works, but also because of my own interests and stuff in writing and being an illustrator, books was always an avenue that we really wanted to go down. Now, the way of doing it is we thought with like having multi-contributor work, like multi-contributors, we don't know how many we're going to sell. We don't know if we're going to sell one copy or 10,000 copies or whatever. So when you have lots of different people working towards it and you don't know how it's going to go, then paying out royalties would be a nightmare because you might have to go through all the administration of giving people 1 penny a year or something like that. We just didn't know how well it would take off. So what we did, and this is how I came to be working through Lulu, is previous to that, a friend of mine, an editor and writer, Andrew McGuigan, put together a series of books called Cumbrian Cthulhu. And what they are is they relate to H.P. Lovecraft's mythos of old gods Cthulhu and that kind of horror writing, fantastic weird horror writing. But with the Cumbrian bit, it's set in Cumbria in the English Lake District. So it gives it a whole new bent and involves the geography and the culture of that part of northern Britain. Now, he started off just originally doing it as a website, and I contacted him because there was a few stories up already, and I said to him, do you want illustrations to these stories? This is how I met him through the website itself. He said, yeah, cool, we'll do that. And then he saw me work, and we put it up there, and it progressed through there. The idea of, like, it might be worth putting it out as an actual book. So looking for ways to do it and stuff. And again, it was a multi-contributor thing. It's like, what we're going to do, how's it going to sell? He thought, well, the best thing to do is any money that comes in, don't take any pay off it, just work for it completely free, and any profits that it makes, donate it to a charity. So with this having the Cumbrian base, there's lakes and mountains in Cumbria, in the Lake District, and so Lake and Mountain Rescue is a very important thing. It's an active emergency service, but it often, unlike the police or the fire brigade or anything like that, it depends on charitable donations for a large part. So that was the charity he chose for Cumbrian Cthulhu. And the book, I'm biased. I've got a few stories that I've wrote in there, and I didn't illustrate the cover, but I illustrated the pictures inside. And this is a collection of the first 4 volumes, and it's good, really good value for money. Hardback edition, loads of stories, and the quality of the stories is good. So taking a leaf out of his book, when we came to do Folk Horror Revival, and we set up the publishing arm, which we called Wyrd Harvest Press. The title for that came through one of the founding members, and who currently runs one aspect of the Folk Horror Revival project now, Darren Charles. And he came up with the idea of Wyrd Harvest, which really pertains a lot to the kind of things that we produce. And so out came, this is a second edition of it, but this is our first book, Folk Horror Revival Field Studies. And it's a collection of thoughts on folk horror by many different artists and writers. And also we have interviews with people in here who, big names to do with the whole folk horror thing. We have Professor Ronald Hutton interviewed, who's one of the leading experts on witchcraft and paganism, particularly in Britain, often in Europe. And if you don't know the name, chances are, if you have watched any documentaries on those subjects, then he is one of the people that they will refer to for an expert opinion. We have an interview with Robin Hardy, the late Robin Hardy, in here, who was the director of the film The Wicker Man. We have a reprint of an interview here with Piers Haggard, the director of the film Blood on Satan's Claw. And it's very, very varied, the book. There's things about Eastern European folk horror, about Japanese folk horror, and things which occur within the real world, such as sleep paralysis, things like that as well. So it is a very, very varied book. And again, following the mode of Cumbrian Cthulhu, we thought, well, we won't take any money off it. Like us putting it together, the staff, the editors, the proofreaders, none of us take a penny. The contributors don't get paid. All proceeds from the sales of the Folk Horror Revival and all other Wyrd Harvest Press books are donated to charity. And the charity that we chose this time was the British Wildlife Trusts. And the reason why we chose them is, unlike other charities where a lot of the money can go into one big pot, this, you can donate directly to one of the little projects they do. And so if, say, in Wales, they're having a project to protect wildflower meadows, it could go to that. Or in Devon, for the reintroduction of beavers, or in the north of England to protect red squirrels. You can what we do is we put a poll up on the Facebook group. People can choose then, vote for which one they want to go to, and then seasonally, twice a year, what profits we brought in through the sales of the books will be donated to that specific project that the people that the folk horror revivalists have chosen themselves. So, and we didn't know how it was going to do, but we were from the offset with the sales of field studies. We were kind of blown away. It did a lot better than we expected. So that encouraged us to produce other books, and then it's just kind of got out of control. I think we're on to about our 16th, 17th book now. But we didn't want to just go through a repetition of what was in there. We wanted to look at other areas. So the second book, which is a mammoth, because we really did not know how many people would contribute to this, is a poetry book. And we thought, it might just be a slim volume, but it might be nice to put out as something a bit different to the first one. It's pretty thick. There's like 700 odd pages or whatever in there. So that one really took off. Then we looked into non-multi-contributor works of just taking different individuals and working with them. So here we had a book by, which is a collection of short stories, weird horror stories called Weird Calendar, by the writer Chris Lambert, who's more well known for his project called The Black Meadow, which is probably quite familiar to a lot of the British people who are watching this today, but maybe it's not so much across the world, but it should be. It's about a mystical village which is set within the moors. Again, north of England. North of England seems to come into a lot of these things. That disappears, but at different times it will appear out of the mist. And then you have different stories that are set through different times where people have their different encounters with this Black Meadow. But in this one, he goes totally varied. What it is one story for each month of the year. And there's some really strange ones in here. It's really worth picking up and stuff. And again, I'm biased because I did the illustrations for this one. We worked with the folk singer, successful and excellent folk singer Sharon Krause, to publish her book, which is aimed for 8 to 12-year-olds, but I suspect there's a lot of older people been reading it as well, which is just a strange magical tale about transformation into hares. It's about some children which became hares, which ties in to folk horror, as I was saying before, because there's the old superstition, witchcraft belief that witches could turn into the form of hares. A hare is a very folkloric, very folk horror animal, because I mentioned it a few times there. Then we've got other books which are in similar veins to the field studies, but looking in different areas. We have the 2-book set of Wyrd Harvest Hymns, which looks at folk music and hauntological music and different music which ties into the whole folk horror and related fields. That was edited by Jim Peters, who's a musician himself and a curator. Well, he's actually a museum curator as well. He works at the British Museum in London, but he's also a curator of music, so he does put together really haunting, really beautiful compilations of music, but melds it together into something new. And so he took the lead on that project, and we followed up again with a 2-volume set on urban weird, which goes. It has a tangential relationship to folk horror, but also goes into hauntology, psychogeography. I always get that word tongue-tied.
That's a hard word. You're working with a lot of very difficult terms.
So we have that as well. But one of the ones pertaining more to what we're discussing today, which has been interesting to do, is we worked with an American editor and writer who's based in Maine, who puts together this annual competition, well, actually several times a year, through a website called theghoststory.com. And it's a competition with cash prizes and stuff that people can enter. And he contacted me about because he'd seen and contributed himself actually to some of the Wyrd Harvest Press books, with the idea of publishing the stories off the website. And again, I pushed myself forward to be the illustrator of these books, and we put them out. We put out the first one, 21st Century Ghost Stories, Volume 1. And it's done really well. And again, some people think with small presses that the quality of the stories isn't going to be good. I'm a collector of horror short stories. I have loads of books from the Victorian times to what's being produced now. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. You can read some of the stories on the actual website. You don't have to buy the book first to do that. And it's very varied because it's international competition as well. So you will get loads of different perspectives and loads of different takes on doing it. And so there will be some things which are to some people's tastes and ones to others, which is a case that you will always get with a multi-contributor ghost or horror story anthologies. It's always the case, no matter which book you pick up on that. There will be stories that which you much prefer to others, but the quality is good. I mean, check it out on the website itself. The quality of the writing is very impressive. And recently, we produced Volume 2, and work has already started on Volume 3. So that it's really exciting for us at Wyrd Harvest Press to be working with Paul and with that competition to put those stories out to a different audience. And another thing we're doing with Harvest Press, why we decided to go through a print-on-demand company and make our own small press, is so, and especially with the idea of donating the money to a wildlife charity, to a conservation charity, is that no excess unwanted books are made. Any book that you order is made specifically for you. There's no waste. It's a piece of art in itself. It's a piece of bespoke art in a way that you can buy for yourself. And so there's the environmental side of that we like as well. Try and find where the rest of the questions are. I've rambled on a bit more on that one than I was intending.
It's okay. I have a couple of questions for you, if that works. So one of my questions is, when you started out writing these stories, but how did you, or what made you decide to go from author to become a publisher? How did you make that shift?
I have worked. I've worked through major publishing houses, and I've also worked print on demand and small press all the way through my own career with art and writing. I was involved in the 90s in the zine scene. When there was a lot of do-it-yourself things. Mainly back in those days, it was just copy and paste photocopiers, mail art, swap your zine with somebody else's zine somewhere else in the world, and things like that. So I always had a bit of the do-it-yourself ethos to it. And through doing it that way, through publishing it ourselves and creating a small press, we had the full control over what we wanted to put out. Whereas if we went through an established publishing house to do it, they would have maybe imposed something pertaining to what they've sold before, to their business model. Whereas we knew our audience, we were our audience. The people who read our books are the people who create our books. So we kind of had a better idea of what they would like to read, because basically, if they have the same tastes as me and the team, they want to read they want to create what they would like to read. And so we decided the best way to do it was just to do it ourselves. And as soon as we pitched the idea, the feedback, the submission rate was excellent, as it has been with all our projects, really. It's grown quite a bit now, but in the early days, it really was like a small community. and friendships are being made. Through Folk Horror Revival, there's at least one marriage actually occurred where the couple met each other through that project. So people connect, and it's us enjoying, us wanting to put out their work. So we decided to go ahead ourselves and publish it, do it that way. And I still think now that it was the best model for us doing that.
Yeah.
What else we got here then?
Well, so we see Bud has a question here that I think is a pretty good one. So I think it's tremendous that you guys donate your money and your funds and donate the revenue to a cause that's close to you and the members of your organization and your community. But he says, a press that takes no money, how do they stay afloat? It doesn't sound like a sustainable business model. So maybe some of it's karmic that you're giving out your profits, and so it comes back to you in some way. But as far as the nuts and bolts of how to keep the thing running, do you have any insight for someone who may be starting out or interested in starting their own press?
Yeah. Go with something that you personally love. Put the financial aspect to one side. Well, no, actually look at what your motives are for doing it. If it's strictly financial, then get advice on the best way to do that, the best business models. In putting the product out, go with something that you would like to read yourself, and have a realism to reading what you have in front of you. If you're writing it yourself, be open to the fact that there is things that could possibly be improved in it. And if people tell you that, take on board and really think about it. Don't get offended. Just try and learn from it. You might disagree, and you might be right to disagree, but often I've found in the work that when people make suggestions and have thought about it, not every time, but a lot of the times I think, actually, yes, that's good. So make sure you do that. Make sure you get somebody competent enough to proofread your work. That is very, very important. In our early days with the first edition of field studies, we learned from putting that out in ways to improve it. And with Wyrd Harvest Press, with Kat Peach and Richard Hing and Graham Malkin, we've got 3 excellent proofreaders which have worked on our books. Things still slip through, so you've got to be very, very aware of that. And proofread and proofread and proofread. Get somebody else to proofread your stuff. Don't just do it yourself. That's really important. And another thing is, people say don't judge a book by its cover. Judge a book by its cover, because other people will. And in doing something like this where it's printed to order, you can't just go into a shop and pick it off the shelf and flick through it and say whether you like that book or not. There'd be 2 things which would attract you to the book. 1 is a description of it, what it's about, and 2 is the cover. Particularly when you're buying online, there's always a risk that you can't look at what you're getting first, and you may look at the cover and you may think, no, I don't judge books by the cover, but subconsciously you might, and definitely consciously other people do. So work with artists, designers. If you're not that way inclined yourself, don't do it, right? Get somebody else to do it. And you can work with other people. You can work out mutual rates of appreciation, whether you pay them, whether you swap things, whatever you do, you can work out a way of going about it. And another thing with the cover and inside the book is fonts. Particularly, you see sometimes good covers ruined by the wrong font, and I personally think it's important. I have a book that was I won't say what it is. I won't bring that to people's mind. It's a small press book, and it's a brilliant book about spiritualism, about seances, about spirit photographers, along all those things. It is one of the best books on the subject, one of the most thoroughly written books that I've ever read on it. The fonts that they've used is absolutely horrible. You look at the front cover, and the picture they've used on the cover could work well. The book is spoiled by what my girlfriend described as Scooby-Doo writing. It has like Scooby-Doo writing on the front. And yes, you think of something like that to be scary and stuff, but horror is such a wide ranging area that if you're doing a comedy horror, if you are doing something that's based on something like the old horror comics, Tales from the Crypt, if you're doing a creep show type thing, if you're doing a Scooby-Doo type thing, the Scooby-Doo type writing will work. If you're doing like a very serious investigation into the nature of ghosts, of the supernatural, of things like that, don't cheapen it. And the fact is, something as simple as a font can do that. I'll get a bit aerated about fonts and stuff because I love them. I love seeing the different typefaces and things like that. And there is a psychological element to typefaces, to fonts. So make sure you pick the right one. Work with designers, work with illustrators, and definitely work with competent proofreaders. And be prepared. Sorry, just one last point. Be prepared if people have suggestions. Take them on board. Don't get defensive or anything like that straight away. I can sometimes get a bit defensive about it and like, no, you're totally wrong there. But let it roll around in your head, and then because you can come back to it and think, actually, no, they've got a good point there. And then you've made the change, and further down the line when you've got the book in your hand and stuff, it's like, yeah, they were right.
Yeah. Well, I think those are all really wonderful points. And I love what you said about the typography. And I will say one thing I think that y'all do really well is there's a aesthetic that goes throughout your artwork and throughout the covers. And so it's sort of, if you see, this aesthetic or this book cover, you can tell it's a Wyrd Harvest book because you use similar typography and iconography. And so I think that anyone who's on this call and interested in maybe starting their own press or just starting their own series or publishing multiple books, think about that, because I think that can be really powerful. These cues that, like Andy was saying, the things that you don't think of consciously, but your subconscious is taking these in and reacting to them. And so we've got a couple questions that have come through. This one from Terry, really interested to hear your take on this, but what kinds of content arouses a sensation of horror in the reader, and why do readers want to be horrified?
That's interesting because I'm actually at the moment been doing quite a bit of research on that because I'm writing an essay for a university press book that started off about nostalgia and horror. But as I've gone into it and stuff, I've really looking into the psychology of horror. And the word horror is so wide-ranging. The subgenres within the genre of horror is so wide-ranging. And what you get out of it depends on the format it takes. With, say, a zombie film, a zombie book, you're going to expect, because of the way that that subgenre has progressed, something quite gory. Same with a lot of the slasher fiction and serial killer fiction. That often has that visceral effect on you that will horrify you, in that sense, that it'll disgust you, that it'll repulse you. Yet there's still something about why do you want to look at things like that? And it is popular. People do want to look at things that look like the sweepings of a butcher's floor. I don't watch the gory films, but that one is quite a strange one. But you have the other elements. You have things such as the uncanny, the weird, the eerie, and you will get people, when you really look into it and stuff, that have thought really deeply about it. The aspect of the uncanny, where something familiar isn't as it should be. There's something not quite right about it. They've been contemplated by psychoanalysts such as Otto Rank, such as Sigmund Freud. I mean, Sigmund Freud, everything goes back to genitals with him. But even not going that far down the line, he did pick out certain things which would be uncanny, such as doubles, like doppelgangers, things like that. Contact from the dead thing. There's a whole range of things which are uncanny. And the reasons for people liking that may not be the psychosexual reasons that Freud always gets to, but there is deep reasons. There's a film, I think it's called Fear Itself, which shows clips from loads of different horror films, but there's a voiceover of somebody talking about their own personal trauma. And this, it's like the therapy you get if you have a phobia. Exposure therapy, that you expose yourself to what's scaring you. With post-traumatic stress disorder, there will be therapies where you actually go back into what it is that has had such a profound and negative influence on your life. You will confront it again. If you're not prepared or as part of that, you may not want to confront exactly your own personal experiences, but something similar, something that takes you back to that same kind of psychological feeling, the emotions that you expressed, to try and understand and deal with what's happened to you. So there could be real deep versions why people do actually turn to horror, which seems like counterintuitive. You would think that you would try to keep away from it, but sometimes it can be healthy actually to confront it, to deal with it, to find that's cathartic feeling. There's the jump scare form of horror, which is short-lived, quick, and it produces adrenaline. The adrenaline gives you a buzz. It's the same kind of scare as going on a roller coaster or engaging in an extreme sport. It's that kind of scare. So you get the horror there for the fix of it, really, for the whole personal, visceral feeling of involvement. The adrenaline rush, basically, the adrenaline rush. There's other forms of horror. The eerie, which, in opposition to the weird and the uncanny, where there's things which are there which shouldn't be there. You have the eerie where there's things which you would expect to be there which aren't there. One of the points I was thinking about earlier and commenting on was why you can walk down a street of a city and it can feel one way when there's all the people about. You walk down that same city street when there's nobody about, and the feeling you get off that place is completely different. So there's the horror in the sense there of experiencing something different, of learning more about things through looking at it through different lenses. There was another one aspect of horror there that I've just totally gone out of my mind. If I remember, I'll come back to it. But
okay, that was good. That was a lot. That covered a lot of ground. So we've got a couple more questions left, and so I'll do a last call for questions as we're coming to the end of the hour. Drop them in if you have anything you want to ask Andy. But the next one is from Nathan. Oh, Terry, thank you for that question. The next one is from Nathan, who says, how do you balance spending time on your own projects versus spending time enjoying others' work? I could easily spend my life reading books and listening to music by other people, but neglect my own.
It's difficult. Sometimes I think I work too long on my own work when I would rather be just like, just lying on my bed reading a book and stuff. So it's very difficult. And when starting out as well, especially if you've got another job, a day job, and you're just coming into this to work out the balance. If you have a family, I mean, I'm a home carer as well, so I have to balance that out with doing my work and doing putting together the work of others. And some people say stop, consume, and create, but the fact is, you find your own personal balance. You find what works the best in your own life, because only you know what time is available to you. Only you know your own energy limits, and it's also a personal thing about how much you consume. I know an author who writes children's fiction who will not read children's fiction by any other author because she does not want to be influenced by it. She wants her own voice in it. I write horror, I illustrate horror, and as I said before, I collect horror short stories by loads of different authors. And the thing is, there you can find your own path by looking at others. You can see what works for you by reading others. And just to be conscious about not being influenced too much, about finding your own voice. I mean, one of the questions there was, what advice would I give to somebody writing a novel? I haven't actually wrote a novel yet myself. I did plan one out. I had the whole idea there and notebooks full about what was going to happen and stuff without actually starting on the finished piece. And then I watched the film, The Skeleton Key. And basically, I'd written the script for that without ever seeing it, without ever hearing about it before, and it was like, ah. But I'm glad that I saw it at that point, not when I'd indulged in a lot of time and stuff doing it. Just whilst on that train of writing the horror and stuff, I think it's really some authors wing it. They have an idea, they start writing it, they go through, and they don't know where it's going to turn out in the end. For me, as a reader, if I've invested my time and my attention into a book, I want a satisfactory ending. That doesn't mean I want closure in the ending, that I want it all nicely tied up. Not at all. I like open endings. I really like open endings. I like unhappy endings. I think that's not in every case, but a lot of the time, I think in horror literature and horror film, to have that lingering thing at the end where you're still unsettled afterwards, it hasn't all been they lived happily ever after, is important. But yes, as you go along with the book, you review it, rewrite it, change things and stuff like that, and it works. This works for short stories as well, because that's the experience I could talk from rather than the full novel. But I always want to know how it's going to end, because there's too many books that I've enjoyed up until the ending and then kind of felt cheated because it feels like the author didn't know how to end it properly. I mean, other people might disagree, because that's another thing. It's reading subjective. And that's especially true across the horror field. Go on any forum and stuff with any film, any short story, any book, and you will find people who absolutely hate it and other people who absolutely love it. So if you create something that you personally would enjoy to read, then that's, I think, is a good thing to aim for. Even if it's in a field that you're not, that isn't your favourite field, as long as you can be personally satisfied and honestly personally satisfied with what you've done, I think is a good thing to aim for. But yes, yeah. the whole balance of time it's still a nightmare for me. And if you indulge in a day or an extra day off and you're sitting there with the books, or you're sitting there watching the films and there's a little voice in your head saying you should be going and doing your own work, or you're putting in like an extra hour, I'll just do an extra hour and stuff, but you've got a real good book that you want to get back to or whatever, then it's just constant nightmares. So you just got to try and find the best possible balance personally that you can, I think.
Yes. Yeah. I appreciate the honesty there. And there's To your point about writing something that you want to read, there's another author, a couple of guys that have written a book on Lulu that actually you should connect with them, Andy. It's called Scarred for Life, and it's just about everything. Have you heard of those guys? Are you familiar with their work?
I know them.
Yes. So when you talked about growing up and how scary it was in the UK, I don't know why there's so much terrifying content for children, but their whole idea in making that book was they wanted to, have some nostalgia and recount those times, and then nothing was out there. And so then they were able to make this book and go on to some pretty good success with it. So we've got a couple more questions. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Andy.
No, just on the Scarred for Life thing. When I first saw the first volume, I didn't know them at that point.
Mm-hmm.
An initial feeling about it was like, oh, bugger, I wish I'd done that. It's the sort of same. It's the same thing coming from that haunted generation. So know exactly where they were coming from. I know the exact references that they made, the particular films, the television, public information films and stuff. And that whole Scarred for Life thing does fit in very well with the folk horror revival, because it's a lot of people of the same sort of ages with the same sort of influences from childhood until now and stuff. And yeah, if there's people who are watching this who haven't checked out the Scarred for Life books, then definitely do, because they're brilliant. They're really, really good. And if you have an interest in any of the things that I've been talking about, then you will find they're just so comprehensive as well. They are the brilliant books. I mean, the pair of them really need bigging up about it because they spot on the excellent work. They do occasionally not. I saw them just before the first lockdown. They had they went on the road with it and put on a show. Once everybody knows what they're doing again and stuff and they're back on the road again, then they are definitely worth checking out then as well, because it's a really good night out.
Yes. Stephen, one of the authors who had been in touch with me. So I do think they have, if you are in the UK, I think they have a couple shows they're trying to do. I think one actually on October 30th and then a couple more. So check them out. Yeah, I thought there's a lot of synergy with what you're talking about and what they're doing. So another great author to check out. So a couple more questions for you. I know that we're running out of time, so we'll try to get through these. Candia says, do you think there's a powerful form of horror to be found in the everyday and the familiar rather than the gothic, such as Amicus versus Hammer?
There's plenty of room for both. And I think as horror progresses, you get interminglings of both. The gothic is got such a long pedigree. A lot of the typical thinking about the gothic does give out those presents a strong mindset of what a lot of people think horror should be. Vampires in haunted houses, and there's a beautiful aesthetic to the gothic. I mean, something like Crimson Peak or something, or Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's just really glorious to look at. There is the sense in that of following a path of horror that you're removed from, in most cases, unless you are a vampire and you live in a haunted house, then it is your everyday. Which gives a purer form of escapism, which that was what I was thinking about before, so it has come back to us in a roundabout way, is that a lot of people like horror to escape from whatever's going on at them in their lives, whether it's something communal like the pandemic, or whether it's your own personal things, which could just be like getting back from a hard day at work and wanting to put all that trouble behind you and stuff and just watch something, lose yourself in something. And the gothic is a good place to do that. It has been brought into different realms as well, so you will get like pieces of work which are urban gothic. There's the film Urban Ghost Story, an old film, well, not that old, but a few years back, which takes basic ideas which you could present in the Gothic mansion to a small apartment in a tower block in a rundown poor area. It's still the same kind of ghost story, but the trappings around it are different, and something like that would remove one sense of escapism because the person could imagine themselves being in that possibly more. So there's a room for both. There's a room for horror, which is closer to home, and there's a room for horror which suspends belief a bit more and gives you just a complete freedom to escape for a while, to immerse yourself in something completely different. And for anybody writing horror who's just about to start out writing horror and stuff, have a go at both of them. Have a go at all different types of horror genre that you can find. Write a slasher story, write a gothic ghost story, write an urban weird story, a folk horror story, because you will learn more about the craft by doing that, by looking at different aspects, looking at different directions, and it will make you think about what is it that works about Gothic, what is it that works about folk horror, what will work within my story. Do I want my story to disgust people, to get that visceral thrill? Do I want to scare them with jump scares so they're looking around them, or do you want to really get under the skin and have something that their mind's going to keep going back to, something that, like, I'm not entirely sure why I'm still thinking about that, but why has it had this effect on us? So by experimenting stuff, then it may give you a better understanding of what will work for you within your own creations. Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, horror. One of the things about horror is that it can be hard to write because you may have the mindset that it has to be scary. You know, that you have to write something that is going to scare people for it to be horror. It doesn't. There's other ways that it can work. Yes, certainly, the scary avenue is a good, strong form of horror, but just the gently disquieting or the viscerally repugnant all falls under the horror umbrella and are worthy of the same consideration and the same attention. You put in what you want to get out of it, and it's the same with your choice of what you want to watch or what you want to read, as well as what you want to create, which could be completely different. I mean, I've met people who write about the supernatural, not necessarily fiction, but say about real life ghost stories or cryptozoology and things like that. They never ever watch horror films. They don't read horror stories. And actors have talked to actors, like interviewed an actor before who'd been in quite a few. Peter Vaughan, who'd been in quite a few horror films and TV ghost stories and stuff, asked him if he liked reading about ghost stories, if he liked horror films. Never done it. Not interested. He's an actor, and he acts in loads of he's gone now. Acted in loads of different things, and that was just part of it. But he realised how it worked, and I mean, the films that he's in, he was very, very good in them. So I don't know.
Yeah, I like the idea of just trying a lot of different types and seeing what works for you and where your voice is coming through the way that you'd like it to. And so I know that it's about one now, but Andy, do you have time for one more question? I think we've got one left. Okay, yeah. Cool. And so I will say, and Jason said when you were talking about writing the book or writing the outline and then watching the Skeleton Key and seeing that they had basically somehow stole your idea before you're writing it, he said that happened to him too. So you're not alone. You're in good company. So Jay,
I mean, just that's a good point at the moment, because any genre fiction, but just even sticking to horror, it has such a long pedigree now that it can be difficult to come up with something original, which is why as well, don't just concentrate on reading horror, don't just concentrate on watching horror, look to other genres and stuff, what's going on. I mean, Another idea I had as a child that never came out, and then somebody else got it and made a film, was Cowboys and Aliens. Just something throwaway like that, just because of the word alien sounding a bit like Indian and the whole thing. So you can come up with like daft ideas like that. I mean, and from personal experiences. I mean, at the moment, everybody's having like different experiences with the pandemic, and it's not really probably the right time to be writing disease fiction because people have had enough of it in their own life and stuff like that. But yet there will be people who do that. But then you get something like the film Host, which is about people holding a seance on virtual communication, such as on Zoom, which has become like a new way of people communicating with each other. And they put a ghost story into that personal experience, and it worked really well. I think it works really well. But then if you want just to write something fun or something daft, the other day, still don't know how it happened, still a bit repulsed by it, but I put my hand in my jean pocket to get out my phone or something like that, and I pulled out a slug. How the slug got into my pocket, I don't know, but I could use that as a basis for a little short story, a weird comic horror story, anything. Go for walks out. A lot of the time that I've come up with story ideas myself is not when I'm sat in front of a computer or got a notebook in my hand and I'm trying to think of a horror story or whatever story. I've just gone for a walk and just absorbed things about us, just absorbing the time, the place, whatever's around. And then ideas have come out of that, which are just a little germ of an idea, just a seed, but you plant it, and then it might go nowhere, it might be a dud, but it might grow and it might gestate. And so just look for inspiration everywhere. Don't look too hard sometimes as well, because sometimes that can lead to like creative block and stuff, because you're trying too hard, you're thinking too much and too tightly. Let it flow, but be open to all sorts and look in places and genres and stuff that don't seem to have anything to do with what you want to write about, because you could be totally surprised that could be exactly what offers something that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Everybody check your pockets right now and see if your next story starter is hiding down there, and report back. All right. So Jay asked, how important is it to create horror that doesn't exactly follow familiar tropes?
Sorry, say again?
How important is it to create horror that doesn't exactly follow familiar tropes?
It depends on your intention for it. If you're doing it commercially, then you want something that commercially people buy into. And as we can see, following tropes does work for people. Remakes of films which were made before has an audience. It's completely trope following. If you can just make it something a little bit different by importing something else that you know about, putting it into a slightly different setting, having a bit of a different backstory to your characters and things like that, then follow the tropes. The tropes are there because they work. If you're more interested in developing a personal voice or progressing the genre in a different direction and stuff, then that's equally as valid and as important. You just follow your own path and see what works for you. I mean, if you do something like radically different, it might take people a while to catch on to it. It might be ahead of its time and stuff, but that is how horror progresses and stuff as well. How we do get all these different subgenres because people are pushing the boat out and trying something different. And the fact is, if you follow to the thing yourself, that you're writing something that will interest you, it's something that you would enjoy reading. Enjoy is sometimes a bit of a weird word in horror. It's something that will work on a horror level for you, that like will frighten you, that will unsettle you, there's a good chance that there will be other people that it will have the same effect on and spread like a germ, pick up momentum there. So do whatever feels right. But don't be worried about tropes either. I mean, don't lay it on with a trowel so that it looks exactly like something else. Don't follow it like a menu. But no, there's nothing wrong with tropes either, as long as you use them in a way that works, and for different people, for a different audience, that will be in a different way. Some people like the familiarity of a typical type of horror, but no, it's always good to come across something different as well. It's a way it just keeps evolving.
Mm-hmm. Well, like so many other questions when, the authors that ask, or if you're trying to start writing and you have so many questions, and unfortunately there are almost no answers that work for everybody. And so kind of just getting into it and spending the time on the craft and in the genre, it can be, is really the only thing that you can do to figure out what you want to do. Nathan said trope responsibly. That's hilarious. Yes, yeah. These things are there for a reason. If they work, then they're kind of good guidelines and tried and true. But obviously you want to kind of blend in with standing out, which is a oxymoron that we use a lot.
I mean, if you have the time and you're really interested in finding your own voice within the writing, write something and put all the tropes in. Right, get the story idea, put all the tropes in, then write that same story, removing the tropes, and seeing how you can make it work without predictability or whatever, without that safe ground. Because something like that is a method that could work. You could have somebody that think they're on familiar ground, so they have this sense of reassurance there, they know what's going to happen, things like that, and then pull the rug out right from under them, send them in a completely different direction, because that will as well, that would work really well in horror, where the viewer just doesn't know. They think it's the weird, it's where the familiar becomes something unfamiliar, and that with that becomes the sense of otherness, the sense of threat. You don't know where you are, and that's a good place to be in with horror, as a horror viewer, as a horror reader, to keep you on your toes.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I love that. Go with the tropes and then remove them and see where it lands up. Because that's one of the things that I love is when you are in a situation where you feel like kind of what's around the corner, what's going to happen, and then it just goes in a completely different direction. And I think that's what most interesting. And to your point, there's really nothing new under the sun for a lot of these genres. They've been around for so long. There's so many variations. So I like that. That's a really interesting thought experiment, or just experiment for you to do in your writing is go with the familiar and then remove it, or see how you can veer from it or take it in a different direction.
I just said before, work towards that satisfying ending, which, as I say, doesn't have to wrap things up at all. It can be completely open. I like open endings. I said that before, but yeah, you have someone like M. Night Shyamalan, who's known for twists in his tale, and to watch them, sometimes a twist is such a trademark, such a trope and stuff, that you might not want to watch the same film again afterwards, because you know where the little trick's gonna come in after you've done it. But horror doesn't have to have the twists. I enjoy the ones which do, So that's another thing when you're writing, because some people think, I might have to have a twist in it. You don't. You just have to see where the story takes you. But again, I stress as a reader, as a viewer, that a strong ending is really important. I stress again, not necessarily an ending that ties everything up, but just something that you don't feel cheated by in any way. And for different people, it will be a different thing as well, because some people want to see the happy end and some people want it all explained. Other people, I mean, I would go into like some things which are like to my own tastes. My favourite director is film director is probably David Lynch, and there's very little true explanation to the things he does, such as the Twin Peaks TV series. There's so much room there for you to interpret things in your own way, which might not be the right way, but because there isn't a right way and there isn't a wrong way, which is the same in life. There's like his work is quite surreal in a way. It's quite removed from real life, but real life can sometimes be predictable, but sometimes it can be wildly unpredictable, and it doesn't always have to make sense. But Twin Peaks is an excellent example. Some people feel really cheated by the ending, but for me, that kind of, well, what just happened? What does this mean? What did that mean? Really works for me, because I personally then engage further in the work. I want to go back to see if there's anything I missed, to see if there's if I got the wrong impression about things. I keep going back and thinking about it. And if you go back to a work, if it stays in your mind, if there's that I think is probably one of the greatest achievements of a writer or of a filmmaker, is that people will continuously think about what you've done, not just like turn the switch off and then it's gone, it's just something else, or the book's closed. Something that sticks with you. And I think that is probably it is obviously, it's a very, very difficult thing to achieve. But I would aim for it myself, and I think it's a good motive for writers within their work, writers and filmmakers. I've done, like when I was at college, I did script writing, screenwriting, and again, it's not. There's differences and stuff, but there is some common processes and some common aims of what you want to achieve from it. And it's not necessarily just in fiction. Sometimes you get really, really good documentary films, and of course that often depends on what the initial subject is. But you can watch which I have done, watch two documentaries about the same subject, and some can really, really affect you, and others, for some reason, don't. So, but one man's poison is another man's meat. That you're not gonna, in no work, you're not gonna satisfy everybody. So you just got to accept that and just hope that the people who will see your work, that it does resonate and does connect and is appreciated by them. But you also have to accept and not get offended by the fact that there's other people who just won't get it, or do get it and don't like it, or if they think they could do it better, that's not for you. That's not a good thing, but for them, it's a good thing, because it spurs their own creative output. If they think they can do something better, then they might be motivated to have a go, and they could end up producing some excellent works. So negativity can work as well, but not necessarily for you, but it can as well for you, because sometimes people who say, well, I would have done this different, and you look at it and think, yeah, actually on hindsight you're right. But it is, you've got to learn with it as well. It
seems like there's yeah.
And have fun with it as well. I mean, that's another thing. If you don't enjoy it, don't do it.
Yes, Yeah, I think that's a good point, especially for any writers. If you don't enjoy it, it's going to be quite an uphill battle. And as far as the open-ended endings, we have a couple people in the chat that are agreeing with you and saying it feels good when you leave something kind of open-ended and then you're sort of unsettled by it. So a couple of folks are agreeing with that. So Andy, we're coming to the end of it. Tell people where they can find you or where they can keep an eye on your most recent works.
Could be found on Twitter under my own name. There's a Folk Horror Revival Twitter account, which is run by Richard Hing, which shares lots of things that people who are interested in folk horror and the related fields will get a kick out of. But it's also a good place to keep up with us if we putting out new books and things. There's a Folk Horror Revival website blog. So if you just Google in Folk Horror Revival, they should bring these things up. There's a Facebook group. Me personally, I have a Facebook page and a Facebook profile and a Twitter profile, all under my own name. So if you find me on there, then again there will be things shared which will be of interest to things that we've discussed today, as well as writing books and things. What I do on the Folk Horror Revival website, and also for some magazines such as 14 Times, is write reviews of other books. So if you follow me there on my social media, then if you kind of like the things which I'm putting out, then it might open other doors to other authors, other creators whose work you would appreciate as well. So, yep, just you might. My surname's spelled Paciorek because that's a harder one to Google than Folk Horror Revival. But if you find Folk Horror Revival online, then you'll find me lingering about in the shadows somewhere around about. So, yes, that's the best way to do it, and to just keep an eye on the Wyrd Harvest Press Lulu page, which has all our titles there with a description and stuff. So do that.
Yes, yeah, and I can drop that in the chat as we come to the end today. So, Andy, thank you so much. I will drop that link in the chat right as we close here. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. Andy, thank you so much for your time and all of your wealth of information that you shared today. Do you have anything to be on the lookout for Halloween? Any tips for anybody? What's the right way to celebrate Halloween?
Well, just stay safe and have fun.
That sounds good.
I think I'll probably indulge in maybe a glass of absinthe or two. So I think that might be the way that I say the spirits in with the spirits. So, but no, just have fun and have a good time, enjoy it, and keep creative.
Keep creative. That sounds great. Well, thank you so much again for joining us. Everyone, for tuning in today, thank you so much. I hope this was inspiring to you. Thanks, Andy, and happy Halloween, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Yep, Halloween.